My name is Lena Monroe.
I'm 42.
A widow. A mother of 2. And the only person in that dining room who looked like she didn't belong. But I kept smiling. Because when you've been invisible long enough, you learn how to survive by pretending you don't notice. That Thanksgiving should have felt like family. It should have smelled like cinnamon and felt like safety. Instead, it felt like performance. And it smelled like someone else's house. Vanessa, my sister-in-law, was hosting as always. Her home is the kind of place where everything matches. The tablecloth, the centerpiece, the way her laugh gets sharper when she's had just enough Chardonnay. She'd sent the invite 2 weeks before, with the subject line, "Celebrating Family, Henderson-style fallen leaf sparkles." I hesitated. But I knew I'd go. Not for her. For my kids. Because even when you're no longer official family, you show up for the sake of tradition. For the illusion that maybe, just maybe, your children won't feel how unwanted you really are. Leo, my youngest, was excited to see his cousins. He wore a button-up that didn't quite fit anymore. Sleeves a little short, collar too tight, but he said, "Grandpa likes it when I look smart." And so I ironed it. Twice. Maddie, my 13-year-old, braided her hair herself. She used her new clip, the one we bought together at the drugstore when I said, "Go on. You've earned it." She didn't know I skipped lunch that day to make room in the grocery budget. She didn't need to know. We baked a pumpkin pie the night before. From scratch. With real spices. Leo sprinkled cinnamon like it was glitter. Maddie cut leaf shapes into the crust. It wasn't perfect. The edges browned a little too much, but it was ours. And I was proud to carry it in. When we arrived, Vanessa opened the door in heels. Not even kitten heels. The real ones. She looked me up and down once, said nothing, then turned to the kids. "Shoes off at the door, please."
No exceptions.
No, happy Thanksgiving. No, how was the drive? Just rules. Always rules. Leo bent down quickly to untie his shoes. I helped him with the knot. His face was already starting to fade, the way it does when he senses he's already in trouble without knowing why. I kissed the top of his head. "You're doing great," I whispered. Inside, the table was set like a wedding catalog. Cloth napkins folded into swans. Gold-trimmed name cards. Leo and Maddie's cards were placed farthest from the center, at the very end of the kids' table. That was expected. But mine? There was no card. I stood there, pie in my hands, blinking. Vanessa's husband, Paul, glanced up. "Vanessa, I think we forgot Lena's spot." "No, I put her at the kitchen island, closer to the oven. She can help refill the sides." She said it like it was thoughtful, like it made sense. Like a woman sitting alone with the stuffing dish was somehow an honor. I laughed politely and walked toward the island. The stool wobbled. I set down the pie. No one looked at it. 3 other pies were already plated on fine white porcelain, labeled in delicate cursive. Maddie stood by me for a second, unsure. "Go sit, sweetheart," I said. "Tell Leo to save you a seat." She nodded, then hesitated. "Do I call Aunt Vanessa Aunt? Or just Vanessa?" I smiled with my mouth only. "Call her whatever feels comfortable." She nodded again, then walked away with her chin just a little too high. Dinner dragged the way family events do when everyone's pretending things are fine. They praised Vanessa's stuffing like it was culinary genius. They toasted to Henderson resilience. Paul made a joke about surviving the year. I forced a laugh. No one mentioned Mark. No one asked about how the kids were handling things. No one asked about me. When dessert came, Vanessa stood with her wine glass. She tapped the side with a fork the way people do when they want the room. She smiled wide. All teeth, no warmth. Just a quick word. "We're all here," which is rare and beautiful. Family isn't easy, but it's the people who show up, who maintain standards, who raised the next generation with dignity. She paused, then locked eyes with me and then with my children. And some of us understand that better than others. Few chuckles. Nervous ones. Then she added, almost casually but with knives for syllables, some of us are trying to uphold a name. And some are just playing house with dirty strays. The silence was so sudden, I could hear Maddie's fork drop. Leo's little hand slipped into mine under the island. He didn't understand all of it. But he understood enough. Enough to know he wasn't wanted. Enough to feel shame for simply being alive in that room. I stood. Excuse me.
Vanessa Blint, faux innocent.
Lena, don't be so emotional. You know I say these things with love. That word love used like a club. She smiled. So confident. She thought I wouldn't make a scene. And she was right. Because scenes don't change hearts. But records do. And from that moment on I started keeping one. I looked at my kids. Maddie's face was blank. Too blank. She was retreating and I knew that place. That place you go when you're being cut down in front of people who say they love you. Leo was near tears. Mommy, can we go? I nodded. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't take dessert. I didn't thank anyone for the invitation. Packed up my kids. And walked out. On the way to the car, Maddie asked, "Are we not a real family?" I opened the car door. Tucked her coat in. Buckled Leo's seatbelt. Then I knelt beside her and said, "Sweetheart, we are not just a real family. We are the best part of this family. Because we love without needing anyone's permission to." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The way Vanessa said it. The way no one corrected her. And most of all, the way Caleb looked. Caleb, her son. 9 years old. Quiet. Pale. He hadn't said a word all night. But as we left I saw something. He flinched when she reached for his shoulder. Not a lot. Just enough. Enough for someone who knew what fear looked like to notice. That's when something inside me shifted. Not in anger. But in clarity. Because I couldn't stop Vanessa from being who she was. But I could stop pretending I didn't see what she was doing. And I could protect more than just my own. If you've ever sat at a table where you weren't welcome. If you've ever watched your child shrink under someone else's smile. Then you already know why I didn't stay quiet. This was the moment everything began. But it wasn't the moment I fought back. That came later. After what Caleb whispered to me the next time I saw him. People think grief is loud. That it looks like crying at the funeral or breaking dishes in the kitchen. But what they don't tell you is that grief is also quiet. It's the silence after everyone stops calling. The ache when someone refers to your life in past tense. And the moment you realize you've been moved from the center of the room to the edge. When Mark died, the casseroles came. So did the cards, the texts, the checking in calls. And then just like that, they didn't. People have a timeline for your sadness. 6 months in, they start saying things like, "You're so strong." He'd want you to move forward. At least you have the kids. I nodded. Smiled. Folded laundry while they talked. But I was still learning how to breathe without him. Still whispering good night into an empty pillow. And yet somehow I was already expected to be fine. Vanessa's tone changed around that time. More clipped. Less friendly. Not cruel. Not yet. Just colder. She started referring to me as Mark's widow instead of by name. She didn't say it to be mean, she said it to make it clinical. Distant. Lena's bringing the pie, you know, Mark's widow. Like I was a footnote. A cautionary tale at the end of a chapter they were done reading. At holidays I was invited, but never included. My place setting was always on the corner. My name never made it into the family newsletter they sent to Mark's extended relatives. Group photos were taken without anyone asking if I was okay being behind the camera. When I offered to help with party planning, Vanessa would say, "Oh no, just relax. This isn't your job anymore." That word, anymore, landed hard. It wasn't that I wanted control. I just wanted to matter. Not as the guest who lost her husband, but as a woman who was still here, still standing, still raising 2 children, and doing it without a safety net. My daughter Maddie picked up on it faster than Leo. She'd say things like, "Mom, why does Aunt Vanessa always act like we're just visiting?" Or, "Why did she take photos with Lily and not us?" First, I tried to explain it away. "She's just busy. She probably didn't mean it. Maybe next time we'll be in more photos." But Maddie wasn't buying it. Because kids are small, not stupid. They know when they're being weighed and found lacking. There was this one family barbecue. Maddie was around 10. Leo was chasing bubbles. Maddie had helped me bake chocolate chip cookies, her favorite. She brought a plate out to the adults, smiling proud. Vanessa took one, bit into it, then said, "Oh, that's sweet. A little underbaked though. Maybe next time use real butter." Maddie's face fell. Just a little. She set the plate down and walked away. Later, I found her in the guest room wiping her eyes. "Do you think Aunt Vanessa just doesn't like us?" I pulled her into my arms. "I think some people have trouble making space for others they didn't choose." I said it gently, but inside it broke something. Because my children weren't accidents. They weren't burdens. They were my reason. And watching them shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone, that was grief all over again. Mark's family had always been formal, polite, but after his death, they became something else entirely. They became a mirror, reflecting back all the ways I no longer fit. There was the Christmas they forgot to give Leo a gift, and blamed it on miscounting. The birthday party where Maddie got a plastic bracelet while her cousin got a bike. The way Vanessa introduced us to new neighbors. "This is Lena. She was married to my husband's late brother. She's here with her kids today." Was. Here with. It was like we were on borrowed time. I brought it up to Paul once quietly. "Sometimes it feels like I'm being slowly erased." He looked uncomfortable. "I think you're being sensitive. Vanessa's doing her best to include you. But inclusion isn't about being allowed to sit at the table. It's about being seen once you're there." One summer they all took a trip to Tahoe. Maddie saw the pictures on Instagram. Boats. Bonfires. Matching t-shirts. She stared at the phone, her eyes slowly dimming. "Did they forget to invite us?" she asked. I didn't know what to say. "So elite. We must have missed the email." She handed the phone back to me and said, "It's okay. I like our little trips better anyway." She was trying to make me feel better, even though she was the one being left out. Scott, Mark's younger brother, tried to stay neutral. "You know how Vanessa is," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." But that's the thing. It's never what people mean. It's what they let you feel. It wasn't always Vanessa who did the wounding. Sometimes it was silence. Like the time Leo made a handmade card for Grandpa's birthday. He spent an hour on it, drawing little stick figures of them fishing together. Robert opened it, smiled stiffly, then set it down without reading the inside. Later I found the card in the trash. Unopened. Unbent. Still folded exactly how Leo had handed it to him. I didn't tell Leo. I just told him Grandpa must have misplaced it. Because I couldn't let another cut bleed out loud. I started creating our own traditions. Game night Fridays. Saturday baking. Midweek movie marathons with popcorn for dinner. They weren't elaborate. But they were ours. And in them my children never had to earn their worth. Still the wounds stacked quietly. Especially for Maddie. At 13 she stopped calling Eleanor grandma. Started sitting next to me at gatherings instead of the cousins. Stopped asking why her gifts were smaller or her name was left off the group chat. That's the thing about exclusion. Eventually, you stop asking to be let in. Then came the Thanksgiving. The dirty strays moment. The moment it wasn't quiet anymore. The moment she said out loud what we'd all felt, but couldn't prove. And as horrifying as it was to hear, it was also liberating. Because now it wasn't just my fear. It was real. It had a name. And it came out of her mouth. In front of witnesses. After we left that night, I tucked Leo into bed. He asked, "Are we still part of the family?" I kissed his forehead. "We're the part that knows how to love." He nodded, as if he understood, even at 8, that sometimes the smallest piece is the most powerful. Then Maddie came into my room. She crawled into bed next to me like she hadn't done in years, and whispered, "I don't want to go back there anymore. I don't want to pretend." I wrapped my arms around her and said, "We won't." But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I kept thinking about one thing. Not Vanessa. Not the insult. Not even the silence. I kept thinking about Caleb, Vanessa's son. 9 years old. Always watching. Always quiet. And that flinch. The way he pulled away when she reached for him. It wasn't dramatic. It was small. Practiced. And that's what made it terrifying. Because I recognized it. That wasn't the flinch of defiance. That was the flinch of a child who's learned that love sometimes comes with raised voices and rough hands. And I couldn't unsee it. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But I knew this. I wouldn't let her turn Caleb into a ghost in his own home. Not when I had eyes. And memory. And the quiet kind of strength that no one sees coming. She thought I was soft. Forgettable. But soft doesn't mean silent. And forgotten doesn't mean powerless. This is where everything turned. And where I stopped waiting for someone else to notice. I didn't plan to go back to Vanessa's house. Not after Thanksgiving. Not after those words, dirty strays, sliced through the air like a knife wrapped in velvet. But some things aren't planned. Some things find you when you're trying to forget. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Gray skies. Light drizzle. The kind of day where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I had just picked Leo up from school when my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. Just 3 words. "Can you come?" No context.
No he pas allí.
No details. I stared at it, heart tightening, every instinct screaming no. But curiosity can be louder than fear. And something about her phrasing, not help, not visit, just come, felt off. I texted back. "Is everything okay?" She replied. "Just need a favor. Caleb's home sick. I'm late for a lunch meeting. Paul's out of town." That was it. She needed a babysitter. The woman who made sure my kids knew they were guests in their own bloodline now needed me to watch hers. I should have said no. But I didn't. Because even anger bows its head to the sound of a child's name. Especially a child who flinches when his mother touches his shoulder. I told Leo we were stopping by for a bit. He groaned, but I promised we'd pick up ice cream on the way home. When I pulled into Vanessa's driveway, it was spotless as ever, white stone path, trimmed hedges, a wreath so perfectly symmetrical it looked AI generated. Vanessa opened the door wearing sunglasses and stilettos, as if she were late for an award show instead of a casual lunch. "He's upstairs. Thermometer's on the nightstand. He's just being dramatic." She didn't make eye contact. She handed me the house key and said, "Don't let him eat too much sugar. He lies about taking his medicine. And he's been sulking all morning. Honestly, I think it's attention-seeking." I didn't reply. Just nodded. She looked me up and down, not in hate but in something worse. Dismissal. Then she walked away. The door clicked behind her. Silence. I called out gently, "Caleb?" "It's Lena." I'm here for a little while. No answer. I walked up the stairs slowly, careful not to disturb the curated quiet of the home. I reached the second floor. Still no sound. Then, from behind the bathroom door, I heard something. A sniffle. Then a choked breath. Caleb, I said softly. Still silence. I crouched down and rested my ear against the door. Another sniff. Then the rustle of fabric. A faint hiccup. Sweetheart, are you okay? Can I come in? A pause. Then a whisper. She said I ruined her day. The words were so soft they nearly broke. I didn't open the door right away. I just sat down outside it, back against the hallway wall, feet flat on the floor like I had all the time in the world. I'm sorry you're not feeling well, I said. Sometimes when I was sad, I'd hide in the bathroom too. It felt like the only place that didn't ask me to smile. Another silence. Then through the door he asked, "Do you think I'm bad?" The question landed in my chest like a brick wrapped in silk. I leaned forward, lowered my voice to a whisper and said, "No, Caleb. I think you're a kid who needs someone to remind you you're already good." A beat passed. Then the lock turned. The door creaked open an inch. Then two. He peeked through, eyes red, face blotchy, pajamas hanging too loose on his small frame. He didn't speak. Just looked at me like someone waiting for permission to exist. I smiled and said, "Hi, buddy." He opened the door fully. I stepped in slowly and sat on the closed toilet lid while he leaned against the tub. He didn't cry anymore. He just looked tired. On the sink was a toothbrush. Dry. Beside it, a bottle of children's cold medicine. Also untouched. I noticed a small towel folded perfectly beside the soap. Too perfectly. Like a stage set. Like something done for someone else's camera, not for comfort. She got mad because I coughed too loud during her phone call, he said. Then she said I was acting. That I was embarrassing her. I closed my eyes for a moment. Gathered the quiet fire that had started burning in me weeks ago. Back when Leo's hand trembled under the dinner table. "Has she hit you?" I asked gently. He shook his head quickly.
No.
Not like hitting. She squeezes my arm sometimes, and yells in my face. And when I cry, she tells me to grow up. He looked down. She says I'm too soft. Like my dad. I nodded slowly. Your dad's softness is a strength. Don't ever forget that. He blinked. The words confused him. But something in them softened the line of his shoulders. I didn't push more. I just said, "Want to come downstairs? We can watch a cartoon while you eat soup. You don't have to talk if you don't want." He nodded. And that was enough. Downstairs, I heated some broth while he curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like expensive detergent and nothing else. He didn't speak for a long time. Just watched the screen, one hand tucked under his cheek. Then out of nowhere he asked, "If someone is mean to you, can you still love them?" I paused, set the spoon down, sat beside him. "Yes, you can, but you don't have to stay close to them. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you." He nodded slowly, then whispered, "I wish you were my mom." I looked at him, this boy so small, so smart, so clearly yearning for a kind of love that didn't come with judgment. You don't need a new mom. You need to feel safe being who you are. Then I added, "But if you ever need someone who sees you, who believes you, I'm right here." He leaned into my side. Didn't cry. Didn't say another word. Just stayed close like someone memorizing warmth. When Vanessa came back, she barely looked at him. She breezed in, dropped her keys, checked her lipstick in the mirror and said, "He wasn't too dramatic, I hope?" I didn't answer. Just helped Caleb stand. His eyes dimmed again the moment she stepped in. The light heat had curled up next to me, gone. He walked to her without being asked. Like a reflex. like a train thing. And it took everything in me not to grab her by the shoulders and scream, "Do you even see him?" But instead I just watched and memorized. Back home I tucked Leo and Deanna, Métis, sat in the kitchen and stared at my phone for 20 minutes before calling a friend from my old church who worked at social services. I didn't name names. I just asked questions. Lots of them. What counts as emotional abuse? Can a child request to live with someone else? If you suspect neglect but can't prove it, what's the first step? She didn't ask who or why. She just gave me the truth. And the number to a woman named Sandra. I wrote it down. And as I folded the note and slipped it into my journal, I thought, Vanessa doesn't know the strength of the woman she insulted. Because while she was mocking my pie and moving my name to the edge of every room, I was learning how to protect quietly, completely, permanently. And that night I promised myself something. No child under my watch would ever feel like a problem again. Not Caleb. Not Maddie. Not Leo. Not ever. The next morning I didn't go straight to child services. I packed lunch boxes. I helped Leo tie his shoes twice because his fingers were still learning how to loop. I reminded Maddie to bring her science project. I tucked their jackets around their shoulders like armor. Because before you go into battle, you make sure your house is warm. Then I drove to the government building. The child welfare office sat between a DMV and a bakery. The irony wasn't lost on me. That you could register your car, buy a croissant, and report a child suffering all within 100 feet. The walls were beige, the kind that hum with fluorescent silence. I held the number slip in my hand, B17. I kept reading it over and over like it might rewrite what I was about to do. When Sandra called me in, she didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just looked at me like someone who had seen it all and still chose to stay in the job. That alone gave me hope. "You're calling about a child?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. "His name is Caleb Henderson." I told her what I'd seen. Not just the flinch. Not just the dry toothbrush or the untouched medicine, but the slow dimming, the practiced silence, the way Vanessa's voice made him disappear without touching him. "Has he said he's being abused?" "No," I admitted. "Not in so many words. But he's afraid to speak. And he asked if he was a bad kid." Sandra nodded slowly. She didn't interrupt. She didn't challenge me. She just listened. When I told her about the Dirty Strays comment at Thanksgiving, her eyes flicked up. "She said that in front of your children?" "Yes," I said. "And your children are?" "Mine," I said. "Leo and Madison. I'm a widow. Their father was Mark Henderson, Caleb's uncle." Her face softened just slightly. Because in rooms like this, labels matter. And widow still carries weight. It still says, "She's seen enough." Sandra explained the process. If there's no evidence of physical harm, we approach it as emotional safety. It can be harder to prove, but if the child confirms distress, we can escalate. "Will they take him away?" I asked. "We don't take children," she said. "We protect them. Sometimes that means counseling. Sometimes temporary guardianship. Sometimes just monitoring." Then she looked at me directly. "Would you be willing to take him if it came to that?" I didn't even pause. "Yes." I drove home afterward in silence. No music.
No podcast.
Just the sound of my breath and the way my fingers gripped the wheel like it might float away if I let go. Because it wasn't about proving Vanessa wrong anymore. It was about making sure Caleb didn't grow up learning to hate the softness inside him. That week passed in slow motion. I still did homework with my kids. Still washed the dishes. Still answered emails from the PDA. But in the back of my mind, I kept replaying Caleb's whisper. She said I ruined her day. And I knew, even if CPS did nothing, I couldn't let that sentence be the story of his life. Then came the phone call. Friday morning. Unknown number. I stepped outside onto the porch to answer it. This is Sandra. I'm letting you know that a wellness check has been approved. We'll be visiting the home unannounced within 72 hours. Will you tell her it was me? We don't name reporters. But sometimes people assume. Let them, I said quietly. Saturday afternoon. It was raining. Maddie and Leo were playing Monopoly on the floor. Arguing, laughing, accusing each other of cheating like it was a family ritual. Then I got the text. From Paul. Did you report Vanessa?
No puntuación. No pleasantries.
Just the kind of message that makes your stomach drop without moving. I didn't respond, because the next one came 30 seconds later. They came to the house. She's furious. Says you're trying to steal her son. That's when I knew the visit had happened. And I also knew something else. She was scared. Because people like Vanessa don't get scared unless something cracks their performance. And the fact that someone dared question her motherhood? That was a rupture. Sunday evening I got another call. This time from Sandra. We visited the home. Caleb was nervous. But when we spoke to him privately, he confirmed some patterns. Is he okay? He will be, she said. We're starting with in-home counseling. Mandatory sessions. We'll also be checking in weekly. But we'll need someone else involved. Someone he trusts. Your name came up. I felt my throat tighten. What did he say about me? She paused, then read from her notes. He said, Miss Lena listens like it's a secret. I sat down on the couch, phone still in my hand, and cried. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally saw what I had been doing all these years. Not just for Caleb but for my own kids too. Loving like it's a secret. Like it's not supposed to be noticed. But doing it anyway. The next time I saw Vanessa wasn't at her house. It was at church. The kind of place where appearances matter more than prayers. She spotted me from across the aisle and walked straight over. Heels clicking like a warning bell. You have some nerve, she hissed under her breath. Do you know what you've done to my family? I looked her straight in the eye. I protected your son. She blinked. Not because she didn't understand, but because she wasn't expecting clarity. People like her thrive on confusion. But I wasn't confused anymore. You'll regret this, she said. We're family. I smiled softly.
No.
I was the help. You made that clear every holiday. Then I turned and walked away. Not because I wanted to win, but because I already had. That night, Caleb texted me from his dad's phone. Just one line. Therapist lady says I'm allowed to feel things. I replied, good, because you feel a lot. And that makes you strong. He sent a heart emoji. And for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up in the middle of the night. Because it wasn't about taking him from her. It was about giving him back to himself. Vanessa didn't go silent. Women like her never do. She didn't scream. Didn't threaten publicly. That would have been too obvious. She retaliated with silence sharpened into daggers. It started with the group chat. The one she used for family updates, school photos, invites, plans. I was removed. One day I woke up and the icon was gone. No message.
No explanation.
Just gone. Then came the birthday party. Leo's, not hers. His 9th. He wanted to invite Caleb. He likes dinosaurs too, Mom. And he said he's never had a party at a park. So I helped him make a card. We mailed it. Handwritten. Decorated with stickers. Caleb didn't come. Not because he didn't want to, but because Vanessa never let him see it. Paul told me later in secret. She said it was inappropriate for him to spend time with your family while he's in counseling. I nodded. Didn't reply. Because when a child becomes a weapon in a war they never started, The only choice is to keep the peace for their sake, and sharpen your own quiet defense. At church, I was no longer greeted with fake warmth. I was invisible. Smiles were pulled away just as I passed. People whispered in half sentences. It's so sad what's happening with Vanessa's family. You know, CPS will believe anything these days. No one said my name. But they didn't have to. I'd become the shadow they used to test their own brightness. Even Maddie noticed. After Sunday school, she walked over holding her jacket too tightly. Aunt Vanessa didn't say hi to me. I looked down and gave the truth gently. Sometimes when people feel caught, they get meaner before they get better. She nodded, then whispered, "She's not going to get better, is she?" I didn't answer, because sometimes not answering is the most honest thing you can do. Then came the meeting. Sandra had arranged it. A formal check-in with Vanessa, Paul, Caleb the counselor, and me. Vanessa didn't want me there, but Caleb had asked for it. "She listens like it's a secret," he'd said again. That phrase stuck with the therapist. It meant Caleb felt safe. So they gave him one support person. And he chose me. The room was cold. The kind with hard chairs, neutral paint, and tissues in every corner. Like feelings were expected but not welcome. Caleb sat beside me, small and fidgeting. Vanessa sat across from us, her smile stretched too wide. Paul looked like he wanted to disappear. Sandra opened the session. "We're here today to hear from Caleb and ensure he feels supported by all the adults in his life." Vanessa interrupted. "I'm his mother. I know what's best for him." Sandra nodded, unfazed. "Of course. But this space is for Caleb's voice." Then she turned to him. "Caleb, do you feel safe at home?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Caleb looked down, then at me, then slowly at his mother. She smiled at him like someone who loved being watched. And in that moment I saw the war inside him. Children shouldn't have to pick sides. But sometimes they know the truth so deeply in their bones they choose it anyway. Caleb opened his mouth and said, "Sometimes I do. When Dad's home. And when he's not?" The therapist asked gently. "I feel like I'm trying not to make things worse." Sandra leaned forward. "Can you tell us what that feels like?" Caleb swallowed, then whispered, "Like holding my breath all the time." Vanessa's face changed, not into rage, into disbelief, because this wasn't the script she'd rehearsed. This was her son, unraveling the story she'd worked so hard to control. "He's exaggerating," she snapped. "He's emotional. He gets that from Paul's side." Paul shifted in his chair, didn't defend her, just looked away. And in that small refusal a crack appeared. Sandra stayed calm. "Caleb, do you want your mom to be part of your counseling sessions?" He hesitated, then looked up and said, "Only if she wants to listen, not talk." That's when I knew. Something inside him had shifted, not into rebellion, but into truth. And that kind of shift can never be undone. After the session, Vanessa stormed out. Didn't say a word to me. Didn't even look back. Paul followed slower. He paused at the door. "I didn't know it had gotten that bad," he said softly. "I didn't say you chose not to look. I just said, now you do." Caleb hugged me goodbye, then whispered, "That was really hard." "I know," I said. "And you were really brave." "Do you think she hates me now?" My throat tightened. "No," I said. "But even if she does, love and hate aren't opposites. Indifference is." He didn't quite understand, but he nodded anyway, and walked out taller than he'd come in. That night I sat on the couch with Maddie and Leo. They were watching a movie. I was staring at my hands, thinking about how being a mother doesn't always mean being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it means being the one who stays until the silence breaks. Later, when the kids were asleep, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. To Caleb. Not to send. Just to say, Dear Caleb, the first time I saw you flinch, I wanted to pull the world over your shoulders like a blanket. But protection is quiet. It's not always fireworks and rescues. It's soup. And soft questions. And waiting outside the bathroom until the door unlocks. You were never a burden. Never too soft. Never too much. And even if no one else says it, you're not hard to love. Love, Lena. I folded the letter and placed it in a box where I keep other unsent things. Because sometimes truth doesn't need to be delivered. Just needs to be written. Family night at Westwood Elementary had always been one of those community events that looked better in pictures than in person. Rows of cafeteria tables decorated with construction paper centerpieces. Teachers smiling like they'd been smiling since 7 a.m. Parents standing in tight clumps, pretending they weren't measuring one another by clothing brands and volunteer hours. This year, the theme was Voices That Matter. Fitting. Too fitting, maybe. Because this time, Caleb's voice was going to be heard. He was nervous, of course. In the car ride there, he fidgeted with the hem of his sleeves. What if I mess up? He asked. What if they laugh? I looked at him in the rearview mirror. You can't mess up the truth, Caleb. And anyone who laughs at honesty doesn't know how to be human yet. That made him smile just a little. Maddie, sitting beside him, added, Also, we'll be in the front row glaring at anyone who tries. He grinned wider. When we arrived, the auditorium was already half full. Leo found his friends and ran off to sit with them. Maddie stayed close to Caleb like a quiet shield. Vanessa was already there. Of course she was. Standing with her usual circle of polished mothers, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She didn't acknowledge us. Not with her face. But her eyes flicked toward me once, sharp, calculating, unreadable. I focused on Caleb. He'd been working on his speech for 2 weeks with his therapist's help. Nothing personal. No names.
No accusations.
Just one message, that kids have feelings. And those feelings matter. He walked up when his name was called. The mic was too high. A teacher gently adjusted it. Then he looked at the crowd and hesitated. I saw it happen. That flicker of doubt, the weight of all the eyes. But then he found me in the second row. And exhaled. My name is Caleb. I'm 8 years old. I like drawing, baking, and Legos. I also feel things. A lot. The audience chuckled gently. But it wasn't mocking. It was warm. Engaged. Sometimes I feel scared. Sometimes I feel happy. Sometimes I don't know what I feel, and that's okay too. A nice lady once told me that feelings are like drawings. You don't always get them right the first time. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. I felt tears press against my eyes. He was quoting me. Verbatim. I think grown-ups should remember that kids aren't just smaller people. We're full people. With stories. With days that are hard. And the best grown-ups are the ones who listen without fixing. That's all. Thanks for listening. He stepped back. Silence. Then applause. Loud. Sustained. Not polite clapping. Real clapping. The kind that feels like sunlight after a long winter. I looked over at Vanessa. She was clapping too, but her eyes were glassy. Whether from pride or shame, I didn't know. But I knew she had just witnessed something she couldn't undo. Her son, her quiet, careful son, had chosen to shine. Without her permission. After the event, people came up to Caleb. Teachers. Parents. Even kids. They told him he was brave. That he reminded them of their own sons. That they wished they'd had his courage at 8. One mother said, You made me think about how I talk to my daughter when she cries. Thank you. That was when I saw it. The shift. Not in Vanessa. But in the community. The narrative was cracking. Because now they'd heard Caleb. Not gossip. Not vague posts. His own voice. And voices change everything. The next day a teacher sent me a photo. It was from the back of the auditorium. You could see Caleb on stage. And in the front row me, Maddie, Leo, all of us looking up at him with the same expression.
Pride. Pure, soft pride.
No performance.
No agenda.
Just family. That evening there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it I froze. Vanessa. She was holding something. Wrapped in foil. I didn't say anything. Neither did she for a moment. Then finally, he asked me to bake lemon tart together. He said it reminded him of safety. I nodded, letting the silence do its work. She handed it to me. I'm not good at this, she said quietly. I wasn't raised with softness. I thought I had to be steel. I let her words hang, then said, steel can build, or it can cut. The choice is always yours. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. But she didn't need to, not fully. Because the tart she once mocked, she now brought with both hands. Later that night, Maddie, Leo, Caleb, and I sat around the kitchen table. For forks. One tart. Same recipe I had used that Thanksgiving, the one Vanessa called dry. Only now it wasn't a symbol of erasure. It was something shared. Chosen. Reclaimed. Caleb took the first bite and smiled. It tastes like being heard. And I thought, this is what justice looks like sometimes. Not revenge. Not courtroom drama. Just a child, a tart, a table, and the feeling of being safe enough to savor something. It's been 6 months. A quiet half year.
No dramatic confrontations.
No viral posts. Just life. Evolving. Healing. Softening in the places that used to bruise. Vanessa still doesn't call. She doesn't send texts. Doesn't ask for favors. She doesn't smile at church. But she doesn't glare anymore either. She simply exists. A distant echo in a story she tried to control, and couldn't. Caleb still visits. Once a week. Sometimes twice. Sometimes with Paul. Sometimes just with Leo and Maddie. He comes with books, drawings, stories about school. He still flinches at sudden sounds, still checks over his shoulder when he laughs too hard. But there's more light now. Not every day, but often enough that you start believing it'll stay. A few weeks ago he brought me a picture. Hand-drawn. Crayon and marker. A house. A tree. A woman with curly hair. 3 kids. Pie on the windowsill. In careful, messy handwriting he'd written, "My safe house. Red Heart Lena's." I cried. Not the loud kind. The kind that leaks down your throat and makes you still. That night I looked back at the first Thanksgiving. The lemon tart. The insult. The way my kids shrank without even knowing why. And I realized I had spent years being called just the babysitter. Just the widow. Just the backup parent. Just the quiet one who wouldn't speak up. But in the end, that's exactly who changed everything. Not with rage. Not with drama. But with consistency. With belief. With presence. I never told Caleb about the letter I wrote him. But I didn't need to. Because last week, I found a note folded into my purse. No name.
No signature.
Just 8 words. You made me feel like a full person. It was his handwriting. I recognized the crooked F. Maddie framed it. Hung it in our hallway beside Leo's soccer ribbon and her science fair medal. Because in our house words matter. Feelings matter. People matter. The social worker Sandra checks in occasionally. She said something to me last time that stayed with me. Most people think protection looks like courtrooms or headlines. But real protection? It's choosing to believe a child before the bruises show. That line broke something open in me. Because I realized I had waited years for someone to believe me when I was young. No one ever did. But that didn't mean I couldn't be the one who believed now. And that's what this whole story is, isn't it? Not a revenge plot. Not a takedown. But a restoration. Of a child's voice. Of a woman's worth. Of a home built not from blood, but from intention. Every now and then I still hear someone say, "Oh, you're Lena Mark's widow, right?" And I smile. 'Cause yes, I am. But I'm also Lena, the one Caleb asked to sit outside the bathroom door. Lena, the one Maddie calls Mom not out of obligation but out of safety. Lena, the woman who showed up when it was easier not to. The woman who baked a lemon tart and watched it become a symbol of survival. This year Thanksgiving is at my house. Not because I asked, but because Caleb did. He texted me last week. "Can we do the tart again? The one that feels like home?" I said yes. Of course I did. There won't be a big crowd. Just me, Leo, Maddie, Caleb, and Paul, who has quietly slowly begun to unlearn. He still doesn't say much. But he brings books now when he visits. And once, when I offered to pack leftovers for Vanessa, he said, "Let's let her ask next time." And I knew that was his quiet way of drawing a boundary. A late one, but still a boundary. I bought new plates. Not expensive ones. Just matching. Because I wanted to mark the occasion. Not as revenge. Not as proof. But as ritual. The kind that tells your body, "You're safe now. You're allowed to enjoy this." Before dinner, we'll go around and say what we're grateful for. And I already know what I'll say. I'm thankful for children who speak. For women who listen. And for the kind of strength that doesn't need permission to exist. Maybe I'll tell them about the first time I baked that tart. Maybe I won't. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Because what was once a punchline is now a memory that tastes like power. And when Caleb takes his first bite, eyes wide, smile soft, I'll know. This is the ending. Not the explosive kind. Not the cinematic kind. But the kind that lands. That lingers. That leaves you full. She said my kids were embarrassing, but I taught hers how to feel. And in the end, that's the only legacy that mattered.